Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another live show where I answer your automotive questions posted to my Google Plus event. Tonight's show is special. It's an hour long thanks to Advanced Auto Parts. I'll put some links in the description to some important things from them that you can check out, but they've also adorned me with some nice apparel. But seriously, they gave us an hour. All right, now, a few things before I get started. First, I sometimes butcher people's names when I read them. I apologize for that in advance. Also, I will be taking questions from the Google Plus event, as I stated, and we have an hour-long show, so we got extra time in order to answer more questions. So feel free to post those while the show is going on, and I'll do my best to get to them. I cannot see the comments being posted to the YouTube version of this video. Therefore, I will not be answering questions from the YouTube comments. So sorry about that. Also, once the event has concluded, I will no longer be answering those questions, so we'll have to wait for the next one, which the next show, let's see, 24th, I'm not sure when the next show will be. It'll be in 2 weeks from today, which is July, I don't know. I'll get to that. Anyway, that'll be in the description for you. Sorry, I didn't have that information for you now. But always at EricTheCarGuy.com, there is information there to help you, the FAQ page. Also, we have a forum there if you want to post your specific questions, and that's available to you anytime. So you can always go to EricTheCarGuy.com if I don't get a chance to answer your question today. Even though it's a 1 hour show, I still want to get to as many questions as I possibly can, so I'm going to jump in now. So now that we've covered all those rules about this. All right, starting out. Come on, computer, work. All right, Kevin Boggs is back again with another timing belt related question. I just got a 2011 Kia Rio with 40,000 miles on it. Fortunately, the factory warranty is in effect since the car died the next day. Turns out the cam sensor is bad. I've read the timing belt should be replaced at 48 months or 60,000 miles. Can I wait for 60,000 miles, or should I go with the time interval? Thanks again for all you do. That's kind of dependent on the condition of the belt. I would say you're probably okay waiting until the 60,000 miles. It's rare that I see timing belts break, but then sometimes I see them break for no particular reason. I actually see more issues with the tensioners than anything else. I would say when you're in there, do a good inspection on the belt, look for dry rot, maybe little cracks in the rubber, anything like that. If you do see those types of things, or perhaps if it drives the water pump and you see maybe the water pump is starting to leak, take care of it then. If none of those things are an occurrence, wait until later. That's what I would do anyway. So I would say you're probably okay, but take a look just to be sure. Justin D. Hello, Eric. I really appreciate the videos. You've saved me thousands of dollars with your videos over 3 cars. I have a 2003 Ford Focus SE with 95,000 miles on it. I have a P0420 catalyst system efficiency below threshold bank 1. I used your diagnostic test with an infrared thermometer and checked the O2 sensor live data, and both indicate the cat is bad. I know you've stated previously that catalytic converters don't go bad without something else making them go bad, like burning oil. This engine gets regular maintenance, and the only symptom this car exhibits is a strong vibration across all RPMs that occurs standing or driving. With this scenario, what are the things that I should be checking for before replacing the cat? I'd hate to put a new one on just in case to get it toasted shortly down the road. Thanks again for the videos and your work. Thank you, Justin. Okay, good plan. Solid plan, actually. I'm glad you heard the warnings, because it would suck to put a brand new catalytic converter on there only to have it fail shortly afterward. Now, the shaking engine, that could indicate a misfire. And what I would suggest you do in that instance is do a power balance test. I've done a video about this, and basically you can do one of two things. You can either disable the ignition to each one of the cylinders, or disable the fuel delivery, such as the fuel injectors, to each one of those cylinders, to try and determine if each cylinder is putting out an equal amount of power. That's the purpose of the whole power balance test. If you find a cylinder that is not producing the same amount, or if you disconnect a cylinder, say you disable the ignition on a particular cylinder and there's no drop in RPM, there's no change in the RPM whatsoever, that could indicate that that cylinder is not working, or not working as well as it should, and therefore not contributing, and could be causing that vibration that you're talking about. That could be something that's ignition related, could be something that's causing oil to burn, like a compression loss, something of that nature, and that could, in effect, damage your catalytic converter down the road. So I would recommend doing a power balance test. And I probably should have said this at the beginning. I also put additional information down in the description of the video once it's complete. It takes me a little while to put it together, but there'll be links to these videos that I'm mentioning here, along with any pertinent information that deals with any of the questions I cover in this show. So be sure to check the description for additional information, and I'll put that power balance test down in there so you can look that over, and hopefully that can shed some light on whatever issues your engine might be having. Also, there'll be a link to my performance diagnosis article that includes that video along with other things that could possibly be causing the issues that you're having. David Holland, I'm trying to start my auto repair business. Oh, I really didn't want to get into, here's the other thing. I want to stick to automotive repair related questions, not so much these other questions. If there's time left, I'll come back to that question, David, but for now, I'm just going to stick to repair related issues. All right, okay. Brandon F. Hey, Eric, thanks for taking my question. I have a buddy with an 03, I think, Honda Pilot with a 3.5 liter in it. It has about 210,000 miles, and recently it started getting random misfire and constant misfire on number 2. We checked the plugs, no obvious faults there. We checked the coils, which are all working, and lastly, we did a dry compression test. We found very low pressure in number 2, but all the others are fine. We did a hydrocarbon test to try and see if it was a head gasket issue, but we found nothing there. It hasn't had a valve adjustment since he bought it, but could valves being out of adjustment result in the very low compression numbers on number 2? What are we missing? Oh, master of Hondas, thanks for all your help. Okay, I don't think valves being out of adjustment is going to cause that problem, but you can verify it with a leak down test. Your compression test was only partway there. You did just the dry test. I'm sure you're aware of the wet test since you mentioned you just did a dry test. And what that does is squirt a little bit of oil down in the cylinder, and then you do the compression test and look for the numbers to come up. They usually do. But if they come up significantly and come up to normal, then you know the problem is toward the bottom of the engine, or most likely is toward the bottom of the engine, and the valves and things should be fine. So you know the loss of compression is probably a result of something happening to the cylinder itself. Now, in the case of Hondas, what I have seen on occasion is intake valves, or actually no, exhaust valves that burn up, and they crack, and therefore cause a compression loss. This could be something that would be found with a leak down test, as I mentioned. And basically what you're doing is you're running compressed air into the cylinder, and you listen in all the key areas, such as at the exhaust pipe for an exhaust valve that might be leaking, the intake for an intake valve that might be leaking, pull the oil cap off, then that would indicate, and you hear a hissing noise, you hear the air actually escaping. If you pull the oil cap off and you hear the air escaping there, then likely what you have is a compression loss due to like piston rings or some other issue on the bottom part of the engine. For me, it's basically just a way to say, okay, problem is in the top or the bottom end, and I know where to go from there. In fact, I've even gotten to the point where I just shortcut the whole process, and I don't bother hooking up a leak down gauge to try and gauge the percentage of leakage. I just listen for where it's going, because at that point I've done a compression test. I know there's a significant compression loss somewhere. I just need to know where, top or bottom. I know no matter what, I'm gonna have to pull the engine apart anyway. So therefore, all I do is just leave my compression hose attached, take the Schrader valve out of the inside of it, and just hook compressed air right up to that instead of buying another tool. This tells me what I need to know. Like I said, where the air is escaping is the important part. So that's the way I would approach it. So a leak down test would tell you definitively where that air is escaping, or if you had a head gasket issue, which I don't believe you do. In fact, it's very rare on that engine. It uses steel gaskets, and if you had a head gasket failure there, I would say it's probably not a head gasket. It's probably something warped. Yeah, like I said, that is not common. As far as the valves being out of adjustment, I don't think that's going to cause a significant misfire there. But if you're looking at a mechanical issue, and it sounds like you are, my bets are something in the cylinder head, somewhere in there. Whether it's valves out of adjustment, I don't think so. Unless somebody went in there and misadjusted them, but you've said that that hasn't been an issue. So, but my guess, possibly an exhaust valve problem. Keep us updated on that, and hopefully I was able to help you with that. Okay, Bank Black. I have a 78 GMC C10 pickup, an oldie but a goodie. Those are good trucks. My issue is turn signals. So far, we replaced all the bulbs, flashers, fuses, etc. All other lights work except for my turn signals. Any suggestions? Now, when you say they don't work, I kind of need more information here. Like when you go to hit the indicator, do they just stay on? Does nothing happen? Those would be important clues as to what might be happening. With turn signals like this not working, if turn signals and your brake lights, at least in the rear, are normally on the same circuit, I believe. So in other words, if your brake lights work, that means that most of the wiring and things going back there to operate those turn signals should be intact. But Also, four ways. You just try the four ways and see if those work. That's usually a separate circuit from the turn signals, though. But if the four ways work, then you know, okay, you can narrow that down. I'm going to put a link in the description to, as I always do, to my electrical issues solving that. What you need here is a wiring diagram. You've replaced components, and I suspect you have a wiring problem somewhere. It's an older vehicle, maybe something's rotted. It's a pickup truck also. A good thing to check with pickup trucks, if you have a trailer connection, check that trailer connection. A lot of time corrosion gets in there or something happens to those wires. I found issues that can affect the rest of the electrical system on the vehicle because of problems there, particularly with turn signals or something. So if you have a connector for the trailer, I would look there for corrosion, look there for problems, look there for wires that might not have been connected properly or just corroded away. That's where I'd turn my attention in that, just as an FYI. But a little more information, I could give you a little better idea, but I think that's enough to get you started at the very least. Okay, Brad Mann. Hello, Eric. Be very grateful if you could point me in the right direction. 94 Accord EX. I have cleaned the intake passages on this car that solve the hunting idle. I have had it about a year, but it has gotten warmer temps outside. I'm having this high idle consistently after the car warms up, about 2,500 to 3,000 RPM. I removed the throttle body, turned the FITV ring, and cleaned out the IAC the best I could. In doing that, the bolt twisted off when removing the access cover. I found a used throttle body, looks like it has fairly low miles, and it came with the FITV and TPS, etc. as a whole assembly they removed from the car. So in doing this, I excluded those items I would think as a problem. I also knew that air in the cooling system could be a culprit, as you have pointed out, so I purchased the funnel to help in doing this, which is a must-have, by the way. Very impressed, and removed quite a bit of air. I'm certain air in the cooling system is not the problem. I've checked for vacuum leaks by spraying carb cleaner as many places as I could think of. Twice, no leaks found. I have not replaced the IAC, but don't want to start throwing parts at it if I can help it. Tapping the IAC when it's idling high made no difference. I noticed the cruise control cable where it enters the module is separated from the plastic mount, but doesn't affect the cruise function. Works as it should. All the cables work smoothly, but are old and cracked. The car idles fine around 700 RPM when cold. Thanks, Eric. Keep up the great work. Okay, a few things here. I don't recommend removing throttle bodies to clean them. I get an inbox flooded with people who try this and often have problems. So I don't recommend people remove throttle bodies to clean them. You don't really have to, if I'm honest. But that said, your idle problem. Also, you've obviously had the throttle body off of there. First thing that comes to my mind, throttle cable adjustment. If you didn't get that correct, it will be putting tension on the throttle, and the throttle will never fully close. If that's the case, it's like you're holding the gas on. The way I check for this is start the engine when it's doing what it's doing, and then take the throttle plate and try to pull it closed further. If you can pull it closed further and the idle comes into normal, you need to adjust that throttle cable. I do have a video on this, by the way. And you don't want to have it too tight because obviously you can have issues with this. As far as the FITV, that is something to only do as a last resort, because that's going to affect your cold idle operation. If you get that too tight, it's not going to work properly. I kind of have some regrets with that video that I didn't put out that disclaimer. There was a gentleman who posted a response to that talked about that very issue, but that is something as a last resort that you go to. It's not one of the first places you want to go for that kind of issue. The first place to go is checking for vacuum leaks, which in yours, you really have to check around the intake gasket, because on occasion I have seen on those engines, the intake gasket fails and causes a high idle problem. But in your case, like I said, you've had the throttle body off, it sounds like more than once. That being the case, I would definitely check that throttle body or check that throttle cable and make sure that it's not too tight, because if it is, it could cause a high idle issue. But that's where I'd be looking first. And other than that, good luck. Okay, we have a Joe Ham Radio. Hey, that rhymes. Hi, Eric. Hey, I'm doing really well with the names tonight. I hope you're proud of me. Hey, Eric, I've watched a lot of videos and learned a lot from you. I'm having an issue with my EGR valve. I've been all over the net looking for a solution. I've cleaned it and thought it got the carbon off, which there wasn't a whole lot. My code scanner gives me a code of PO404 and a P1404 saying that it's stuck open and insufficient flow, and the engine does hesitate a bit on takeoff, then smooths out. So I've seen another video of running it with the EGR disconnected, and I did this, and there is barely any hesitation. Could that mean the valve is no good? I'm going to take off the throttle body next and clean it as well. This is a 99 Chevy Suburban V8 Vortec 5.7. I also don't see a lot of videos on the 5.7 Vortex online. I hope maybe you could get a chance to do some for us. I hope you can give me some info on what to check next. Thanks for all your time on making these videos for us, and keep up the great work. Thank you for that, Joe. I appreciate it. And I have done videos on the 5.7. Was it the Vortec engine or not? I had a friend of mine with a Tahoe that had that. In fact, I didn't know that they were making Suburbans in that time. I almost thought that those were the Tahoes is what they had morphed into. Anyway, we're getting on a tangent here. Okay, so I did look into this problem, and I do believe it's possible that you have a bad EGR valve. You say you cleaned it, and also when you disconnect it, it runs well. So what I'm thinking is that with it connected, it's not functioning properly, and the computer is anticipating that that EGR is opening, especially when you take off from a dead stop. EGR is active under load, and it's there to reduce NOx emissions. So as you take off, if you're noticing hesitation or something like that, it may be the computer anticipating that that EGR is active, and therefore there's that inert gas going into the fuel mixture, and it calculates the fuel mixture accordingly. And if it's not sufficient, it can possibly give you that hesitation. Unplugging the EGR means that the computer is going to ignore that. It's going to say the EGR isn't in play here, so then it runs normally. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, why not try changing that EGR valve and see what you get? I know you don't want to throw parts at it. You know, I'm reluctant to tell you to do that, but it basically sounds like that might be the direction that you're headed with this problem. Like I said, I looked it up, and EGR valve came up more than once. It still could be a wiring or some other issue there, but my bets are, I'll give you 80% that I think it might be an EGR valve problem. We'll try that, but give that a shot and see what happens. Okay, Matthew Alexander. I want to do some basic DIY, but I'm not sure which jack stands are reliable and safe. Are jack stands that can be bought cheaply at AutoZone good enough? Well, I'm not sure if I should say AutoZone during this program, but that being said, yeah, earlier this week, my friend Paul Cox, I did a video about my friend Paul Cox, who lost his life last week because of failure of the supports of the vehicle that he was working on. The vehicle fell on him. So I understand that there's a lot of awareness out there now, and I want that to be the case. Anytime you're working under a vehicle, absolutely make sure it's supported, make sure it's secure, make sure you're on a level surface, do everything possible to ensure that you're going to be safe while working under that vehicle, because it could literally cost you your life or serious injury. Either one of those things would suck. As far as jack stands, I can't really come out and say this brand good, this brand bad. Name brands are the way to go. But the way to go about it is trying to get jack stands that actually exceed the load rating that you're going to be using them for. Say, for instance, use a 5-ton jack stand in place of where you could use a 3-ton jack stand, and therefore you've got that added security. Never use cinder blocks. I'll say that right out of the gate. Never use cinder blocks. But I think you're good with quality jack stands. I mean, I've had people say to me that they've seen jack stands fail. I have not seen that personally, but a lot of people reach out to me these days, and there have been occasions where people have said, hey, I used jack stands and they failed. I would say new jack stands out of the box, made by a reputable company, should be good to go. Try to find some that exceed the load rating that you actually need, and never use just the floor jack as a support. Use the jack stand. So raise it up with the floor jack, let it down on jack stands. Sometimes I actually leave a floor jack in place along with the jack stands, just as an added measure of security. Some people have also suggested taking one of the wheels that you removed or whatever and putting that under the vehicle. If a support should fail, at least you'll have that wheel there, and that could lessen any damage that could possibly happen. You may mess up your wheel, but so what? If you walk away, you walk away. You can go to the salvage yard and get yourself another wheel. But it is good to hear that you are very aware of this and looking to make sure that you're safe under the vehicle. I'm all for that. So reputable brands, look for that, and exceed the load rating if possible of what you're looking for. Okay, We have Clinton Erickson. Hey, Eric, I have a question about two Saturns. There's only one Saturn out there. I meant the planet. The first one is my 95 Saturn SL 1.9 liter single overhead cam engine, 5-speed with 336,000 miles on it. Lately, I've noticed that sometimes when I pull up to a stoplight with my AC on, my tachometer needle moves between 700 and 800 RPMs for about a minute, then levels off and idles normally at 750 RPMs. I just gave it a tune-up not long ago and replaced the plugs, wires, O2 sensor, and coil packs. However, I did not clean the throttle body. Could this have something to do with the idle issue when my AC is running, or is it an idle control valve or vacuum leak issue? Currently doesn't have a service engine soon light on and no codes OBD1. The second vehicle is my mom's 99 Saturn SL2 1.9 liter dual overhead cam engine, automatic with 134,000 miles on it. Her vehicle, when you go to start the vehicle, sometimes her tachometer needle shakes and stays at the 0 position on the dashboard and then eventually comes to life and gives the current reading of RPMs. It also doesn't have a service engine soon light on as well, and no stored codes OBD2. What could cause this issue? Any help would be greatly appreciated. Stay dirty. Thank you for those questions and those comments. All right, let's give a start to the AC idling issue. You say it starts to hunt between 700 and 800 RPMs when you have the AC on. The strategy is whenever you turn the AC on, it puts an extra load on the engine. Therefore, they try to raise the idle RPM up to accommodate for this extra load on the engine, because obviously it's going to bring it down. There's a couple of things that can cause a fluctuation when the AC is active. It could be the AC itself. If there's a problem with the AC compressor, for instance, or a problem with the AC system, and the AC system has to work extra hard, it's going to put more of a load on the engine than anticipated by the computer. Therefore, the idle could fluctuate. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is that somehow, some way, the computer and the idle control system are not able to keep up for whatever reason. Now, that could be, as you mentioned, possibly vacuum leaks. That's always a good place to look. But I would think with vacuum leaks, you might have issues all the time, or you might even have a service engine soon light on for, say, a lean condition. Although back in '95, those systems were not as good about spotting issues with any of those computer-controlled components as they were after OBD2 came along. In fact, that was one of the things they mandated, that they have stricter guidelines. So, and with that many miles on that engine, that's something else altogether. That could be just things that are worn out. If I'm going to guess, and this is purely a guess, just throwing it out there, maybe your idle air control valve is hanging up a little bit. Maybe it's getting a little lazy, not sure. Or, as I said, maybe there's something going on with the AC system. Hard to say. With that many miles, it could be a lot of things. And that's kind of my point, is that you've got some things to check out there. Now, I've written an entire article on idle problems that may help you as far as that issue goes. But yeah, there's more than one thing that you could be looking at with that. Now, as far as the tachometer problem on the other vehicle, that's also got some miles on it, much less than the one that you have. It's a couple of things. It's either the signal going into the instrument cluster, or it's the gauge itself. That's what I'm thinking. And the way you determine that is you try to check the signal going into the, let's see what year with that. That one was a 99. So in 99, if you plug a scan tool into it, you should be able to look at the RPMs on a scan tool. And this is what I would do to try to verify what's happening. I'd look at the RPMs on the scan tool, and if they're there but not reading on the dash or the gauge, then I would say most likely your problem is in the gauge or the wiring or something going to it, because the computer, what you're looking at on the scan tool is what the computer is seeing. So if the computer is seeing the correct RPM range and all that kind of thing, which is important, and it's not registering on the dash, then you know the problem is most likely going to be in the dash, either the cluster or the wiring, something of that nature. But if the computer is not seeing the correct RPM reading, then it could be something like, I believe that signal comes from the ignition module. It could be that that's not sending out a good signal, or it could be a problem with the wires coming out of that. So there's a couple of possibilities, things to get you started, and hopefully pointing you in some useful direction. But thank you for your questions. Moving on, let's see. the stiver. Not sure what you're going with there. Eric, what is your take on universal ATFs like Valvoline MaxLife synthetic ATF? I've been using it in several of my vehicles, all with different ATF specs, Dextron 3, 6, Mercon 5, etc. I have so far seen an improvement in every vehicle, which range from 2 years old to 22 years old. Why bother with expensive spec fluid when MaxLife is $17 a gallon? That's a really good question. And I'm going to say that what you're doing is probably going to work in many situations, but not all situations. It just seems, especially lately, manufacturers are getting more and more stringent about the types of fluids that they use and getting really specific about some of the fluids that they use, particularly in their automatic transmissions. There's not a whole lot left as far as finding fuel economy and things in the engine department. So they're looking to transmissions to try and increase their performance, fuel economy, that kind of thing. So they build these like really high tech, really intricate automatic transmissions. And automatic transmissions were complicated to begin with, even more so now. And they require a very narrow window of specifications in some of the fluids they use. Now, look at the specs on the MaxLife ATF. If those specs match up with the vehicles that you're using or exceed what the vehicle that you're using the fluid in, you're fine. And that's what you can go by. You can look up the specs for the fluid that's supposed to be in there, compare it to the other fluid that you're trying to put in, and hopefully you'll find some middle ground. But there's some vehicles that do not like other fluids, but a lot of those vehicles are using some variant of synthetic. So I'm not surprised. I mean, most vehicles do benefit from the use of synthetic fluids, ATF or otherwise. It depends on the application. As far as your specific applications, not knowing what vehicles that you're using there, it's difficult to say. And honestly, I probably wouldn't know the specs off the top of my head anyway. But if the specs match up and it works, it works. But there are instances where it's like, and what you might do in those cases is you might go out on the net and just see. Just do a Google search on your vehicle and your transmission and see if those things are compatible. See if somebody's tried it before and they had a bad experience. That's the wonders of the internet these days. We can share lots and lots of information. It's not all accurate, but at least it's out there. Okay. Brian's CT. Eric, I have a 1999 Accord. Fuel is leaking along the seam along the front of the gas tank. The seam is hard to get to and the tank is hard to replace. How do you seal it up? You got to take the tank out to seal it up. And if you're going to go that far with a 99, I'd go to a salvage yard and just get another one and put it in there. I wouldn't mess with it as far as trying to seal up a tank. However, I will say this. I have been told, I haven't tried this, but soap, rubbing soap on the leaking area can sometimes cause it to stop leaking. But if you have a leaking fuel tank, that's dangerous. You really should address it. And soap would be a temporary fix at best. They're not as difficult to get out as you're saying. Yes, it could be all rusted up in there and everything, but I believe it's only 2 fasteners and that tank would come down. And then of course disconnect the electrical connections and the fuel lines, the vapor lines, and you've got yourself a fuel tank. If you have, I will say this, if you have the original fuel pump in your fuel tank and it is a Honda unit, keep it. Don't replace it. Don't replace it with an aftermarket unit. The Honda units, hardly ever go bad. Hondas and Toyota fuel pumps, especially of that vintage, I rarely ever see go bad. But I have seen replacement pumps go bad and cause problems. So just going to throw that out there as an FYI. But I say replace that fuel tank. And Honda was good to you because there's also a drain plug in the bottom of the fuel tank. So even if your fuel tank is full of gas, you can drain it out, which is really darn convenient. Because if you've ever had to remove a fuel tank that was full of fuel, which for whatever reason fuel pumps seem to want to fail then, it's a lot more challenging. So you have a lot going for you there. So I wouldn't be so pessimistic about removing that fuel pump or the fuel tank, I'm sorry. But that's how I would address that. And I would address that sooner rather than later, because just picture this scenario. You're in a parking lot, your gas is leaking out. Somebody's walking by, has a cigarette, just pitches it over towards your car. Next thing you know, your car's on fire. You're looking for another car. So yeah, it's definitely in danger. Not to mention if it drips on hot exhaust, that type of thing. Not good. Deal with it sooner rather than later. All right, Wayne Vance. Hey, Eric, what is your opinion on these coolant, automatic transmission, power steering, etc. machines like BG that claim to completely flush out all the old fluid and replace it with new? I have a 2011 Toyota Camry with original factory installed fluids, 45,000 miles with no transmission dipstick, of course. Could I use the BG flush services on my car? Good question. Personally, I like professional flushing machines better than DIY home methods. They are designed for a specific purpose and they work quite well in my experience. And I've used both the coolant flush machines and the automatic transmission flush machines. Been very happy with the result, because with that, with just a regular fluid change, say with an automatic transmission, you're still leaving half the fluid up in the system because there's a lot still in the torque converter. There's a lot still up inside the transmission itself. So you don't necessarily get all the fluid out. These machines replace the fluid. They take all the fluid that's in there out and put all new in. So they are an excellent solution for that. Now, sealed transmissions are meant to be sealed, and they put a special fluid in them. This is the Achilles heel with these flush machines. With the flush machines, it's the type of fluid you put in it. And many times places that perform these services just have a standard flat fluid that they use, and that's all they use. The reason why your transmission's sealed up is because they put a very special fluid in there to make it last forever, whatever that means. And if you replace it with just regular fluid, you're sort of taking away everything that they engineered into that product to try to make it last for, according to them, forever. So that it's a double-edged sword. When it does come time to replace your transmission fluid, having it replaced with the proper fluid in that manner, in my opinion, is probably your best option. Now, when you should do that, I would consult with the service manuals. There may be no service interval for that, which is kind of ridiculous, I know. But from there, I really couldn't say with a 2011. They've got to have some interval, but I don't know about 45,000 miles. I think it's going to be a lot further down the road than that. But I'm going to say that I don't know for sure. But that's where I would check. I would check with the service manual. You might even call up Toyota. Just, you don't have to buy anything from them. Just call up the dealership and ask them, see what they do in those situations, see what they do for those services. And there's a couple of reasons manufacturers seem to have gone to this. One, to lower maintenance costs. So when they sell you the car, they can say, this car, it will save you so much on maintenance because you don't have to do X, Y, and Z. All you got to do is, occasionally change the oil and rotate the tires. Yay. And that, of course, brings the cost over time of the vehicle down, and it's sort of a sales tool. Another thing that manufacturers seem to be doing is making more things modular. They seem to be making things that if they fail, you replace it as a component rather than trying to fix it. They seem to be taking the fix it part out of the equation. It's just a trend that I've seen. I'm not going to get into a protracted discussion about that, but I just wanted to add a little bit into the discussion that we have about this. But I would say check with Toyota, see what they have to say about it, go from there. Okay. All right, Brian Dez. Hey, Eric, love your videos. I think it's pretty awesome that you help so many people. Thank you. I like helping people. It's a great occupation, I can tell you that. Sorry in advance for a possible phantom electrical question, but this is what I'm dealing with. I have a 1998 Chevy Malibu 2.2. I'm having some trouble with rough combustion and occasional stall or two. The car seems to buck if I'm going fast and take my foot off the gas. It's like choking for air. Other times the car runs pretty smooth. My idle seems pretty low, sometimes as low as 500 to 800 RPM. The car also seems to not want to shift itself when it's cold. Just starting out on the road, I recently had a remote starter put in, and I don't want to point fingers, but I've always heard of those things can cause havoc with computers and electrical systems. My question is, then why'd you install it? All right, the computer is throwing the same two codes twice. One of each is consistent and one of each is intermittent. Sorry if my lingo is off. P0404 EGR open position performance, P0405 EGR position circuit low voltage. Long story short, in case you don't have time to read my description below, do these two codes appearing together point to something specific. Is there a way those codes could be pointing me to fuses, relays instead of parts? I had a problem before and the code meant buy a new EGR. To me, the tech I brought it to ended up finding a missing vacuum line because the codes pointed him there. Thanks and keep up the good work. Okay, here's the description. The first code seems easy. Remove the EGR and clean the intake. Unfortunately, I bought a new EGR and spent hours cleaning the air passages into it, so I can't imagine that's the problem. But maybe there's some fresh carbon in there that got knocked off by seafoam. I don't know. The second code is kind of scary to me. I loathe electrical issues. Could that code have anything to do with blown fuses or a loss of power relating to a not so professional installation of a remote car starter? I'll start by saying I'm not a fan of those car starters, but I'm not sure that that's causing your performance issue. And in fact, I don't think it is. Based on everything you're describing and the fact that you have codes for EGRs would indicate that to look there. In fact, I did a little pre-reading about this issue, and I found out that it could possibly be that you have the EGR valve installed incorrectly, especially if you removed it and cleaned it as you stated. And one of the things to check for is, let's see, here's the test procedures. Check the exhaust gas recirculation valve, position voltage on a scanner with the key on, engine off. So you're going to need a scan tool, and you're going to need to look at this, at the EGR inputs. If the voltage is greater than 5 volts and less than 1 volt, record the value. Start the engine, recheck the EGR position voltage at idle. If the idle voltage is greater than the key on, engine off voltage, check for incorrectly mounted EGR valve. The EGR pintle side of the valve has to be on the intake manifold side of the mount. So that's what, like I said, I did a little bit of research on this, and that's what I found. I found that you could have your EGR valve on there backwards, causing these problems. Now, your description, however, doesn't really sound so much like a bad EGR valve or an EGR valve that's installed incorrectly. It almost sounds like you might have some transmission issues on top of this, yet you don't, or you didn't allude to any codes indicating such problems that were there. I'd first try to resolve what you have with the check engine light and the EGR valve and those issues. That's where I would look to first, see if it's installed correctly. Just remove it and look at the holes and see if they match up with the holes on the intake. Like one of them's round and one of them's kind of square. Make sure that those are matched up. And if they aren't, then correct that, clear the codes, and see if the problem is still there. If it's not, hey. But if you still have shifting problems after that, you may need to look further into the transmission to see if you've got something going on there. Check the fluid level and condition for starters, and just see what kind of shape that's in. But yeah, start with that and see what you got. 98's probably got a couple miles on it, so you've got some research and a little bit of work to do. All right, we're almost halfway through, and I want to mention once again that this particular show is an hour long thanks to Advanced Auto Parts. I'm going to put links in the description to them and some useful information for them, but we want to thank them for giving us an extra half hour tonight. So thanks, Advanced Auto. Moving on. So we still have plenty of time. Alistair Haddon. Oh, here we are again. Hey, Eric, thank you for the video supporting vehicle safety. It is a good reminder to all of us. Sorry to hear about your friend Paul Cox. Thank you for that. My question today is about batteries. If the alternator is putting out the proper voltage, 14.4 volts, why do batteries leak battery acid? Is it the fault of a poor quality battery? I have enjoyed the Fixing It Forward videos. Looking forward to seeing part 3 of the transmission install. Thanks again. Thank you for that. Thank you for all of that. As far as the Fixing It Forward, actually you've got 2 more. You've got part 3 and part 4. Part 3 is actually going to be the radiator part, which was a challenge. But getting on to your question, why do batteries leak battery acid? Well, there's a number of reasons why batteries could leak battery acid. One is a crack in the case. The easiest thing to say is a crack in the case. And I'm not really sure what you mean by leaking battery acid. Are you talking about like the terminals on the tops or the sides of the battery getting crusty? Actually, the ones on the tops usually do that. The ones on the side don't normally get as crusty. Yes, that is battery venting. At least that's my experience. And I've seen really good quality batteries that are really stinking expensive that never have that issue. and those were made by Panasonic. I'm not sure if they still make them or there's somebody else making them now. That was one of the ones that I saw, and I never, after years and years, I actually saw one of those batteries last about 10 years. But good luck finding them. They're hard to track down. But I have seen some lower quality batteries that, just the way they're vented, they tend to corrode terminals a little bit more, no matter what you do. Those little cloth things that you put on under the terminals to try and address the issue don't seem to help. So that's part of it. I don't think it has anything to do with the alternator unless the alternator is overcharging. If the alternator is overcharging, and that is anything over 15.4 volt, I can't remember the exact number volts, but there's a certain number over 15 volts, let's just say, then that could cause batteries to explode in some cases. So whether or not the alternator is connected with the issue that you're talking about is hard to say. But I have seen, in my experience, lower quality batteries that seem to have more issues than other batteries. And in my opinion, it boils down to use of materials and venting. So higher quality materials, better metals inside for the lead, better acid, better design. All those things cost more money and equate to, in my opinion, many times a better battery. But then there's other times where you're stuck on the highway, you only have so much money, and you need to get back on the road, and you buy whatever's available. I get it, but results may vary. So I hope that answers your question in sort of a roundabout way. And once again, thank you for your comments. Okay, Doug Eastman. Hey, Eric, I have a 2005 Ford Escape 2.3 liter Duratec with 160,000 miles. Scheduled maintenance says the PCV should be replaced at 100K, but requires removing the intake manifold. A huge job. Suddenly I had a huge decrease in MPG, 23 to 18. Is it time to dive in? Any other symptoms of a bad PCV that I should be looking for? Should it throw a code? Thanks. You know, I don't know if that would throw a code for that or not, and I'm not sure that the PCV is related to your MPG decrease. That would kind of surprise me. Sometimes PCV valves go bad. What the PCV systems does, why don't we just start with that? What the PCV system does is it basically takes the air that's inside the engine, and anytime you have pistons that are running or like that, you're going to have blow-by. So there's going to be a certain amount of compression and loss that goes past those piston rings and gets down into the crankcase. This causes pressure to build up inside the engine. They've known this since the beginning. In fact, PCV valves didn't start out until like the 1940s. When they wanted to seal the engine up. Before, they just used to run a tube out the back of the engine down onto the road. It was called an oil draft tube. And that allowed this pressure that would build up inside the crankcase to escape. And they stopped doing that. It left a nice black smudge of oil down the roads, which wasn't cool, especially if you rode a motorcycle in the rain. But also, they wanted to drive their Jeeps underwater, so they had to seal up the engine. They couldn't have an open tube that led outside, so they came up with a PCV system. I found that little factoid interesting. Anyway, so they sealed the system, and the PCV valve regulates that. It puts a vacuum inside the crankcase so that it helps draw that pressurized gas inside the crankcase out and then burn it inside the engine. That's what it's there for, and that valve helps regulate that flow. So as far as that causing a poor MPG issue, I have doubts. As far as the replacement, well, if they say the replacement should happen around that time, I would look into that. And I would look into see if there's some way to shortcut it. They've been out a while, so there may be some way to do that efficiently or do that so that it doesn't seem like as much work to replace that valve if that's where you're going. But once again, I'm not so convinced that that's causing your MPG issue. But normally that would be associated with maybe a check engine light. Also check your tire pressures. I've written an article on MPG things that could affect your MPG that might be helpful to you. That'll be a link to that will be in the description also. But yeah, it's I'm struggling with this one to try to figure out if there's some kind of connection between the two. And I kind of wished I would have done a little bit of research on this just to see if I could offer you more information here. But if it's part of a scheduled maintenance and you're actually almost double that, maybe it's time to replace that. But there may be some other maintenance item that may be causing that, like your spark plugs might be worn or some other, I don't know if that's got a replaceable fuel filter on it or not. It's hard to say, but check that service manual where you found that information and see if there's additional information there. But tires, I can't stress enough how tires affect MPG, not just making sure that they're inflated to the proper pressure, but the tires that you're using. So if you've recently changed tires and your MPG has gone down, that could be the result. Also the noise, everything. I say this all the time. I even made a video about it, and everybody's like, no, brakes are the most important purchase for your car. The video I did was called Tires Being the Most Important Purchase for Your Vehicle, because in my opinion, they give you the most bang for the buck, and they affect so many other systems, including brakes. But MPG is a part of that. So if the tires aren't or have more rolling resistance, then the vehicle's going to work harder. It's also how fast you drive. If you find yourself driving faster, then that's going to use more fuel. It's just physics. But I wish I had more information for you there, but I don't know. I wouldn't be convinced that the PCV valve would be causing a drop in MPG. Let's leave it at that. Okay, moving on. Abdullah Gaim. I have a 2006 Pontiac Grand Prix 3800 series with 115,000 miles. The engine temperature goes over half, 221 degrees, and the fan kicks on. I decided to do a coolant flush, replace the thermostat, replace the temp sensor, and bled the system, but still overheats. The fans still kick on when it's over half at 221 degrees Fahrenheit. Do you know what would cause the fans to kick on late? Thanks. Love watching your show. Okay, so I'm gathering that you have an overheat issue here. And it goes over half. Well, see, and this is where I'm kind of struggling. Is it actually an overheat issue? You say it goes over half, 221 degrees. And that could be that the gauge is not reading correctly. That could be the cause. The fans are kicking on, so it sounds, and you bled the system out. It sounds like the system is working like it should. But my question is are you getting an accurate reading at that temperature gauge? And I suppose to determine that, you need to check the actual temperature. Or perhaps if you have access to a scan tool, you can look at the reading that the computer's seeing. Once again, if the computer is seeing a different number than what you're seeing on the dash, then you don't trust your gauges. You trust what the computer is seeing is what I would do. So if you look on a scan tool and then the computer says it's much lower than what your dash indicator is saying, then there could be a problem there, and maybe there's some resistance in that circuit. A lot of times they're separate. I'm not sure specifically on that vehicle. And when I say separate, I mean the coolant temperature reading for the computer and the coolant temperature reading that goes to the dash. A lot of times those are separate. Sometimes they're linked together, sometimes they're not. But that's what I'd be looking for, some kind of discrepancy between those two, just to make sure that it is indeed overheating. Also, airflow is important, and coolant flow. So it sounds like you replaced most of those parts, except for, like, say, the water pump. If I have seen on occasion where water pump impellers are damaged or rusted away and are not as efficient as a result, so they don't allow fluid to move through as well. And those are weird overheats that I see with those. That's like the strange thing where it doesn't make sense. Like if you're sitting in traffic and your vehicle's overheating, then the first thing I look to is the operation of the cooling fans. If the cooling fans aren't coming on, there's no airflow while you're sitting in traffic. That's what they're there for. So if it cools down as you start to drive away, that is a pretty good indication that you might have a problem with cooling fans. And if it overheats while you're going down the highway, sometimes those are those weird overheats that could indicate that there's a flow problem. And it could be like impellers on a water pump, but it also could be a restriction in the system, like some kind of debris in the radiator or something that's not allowing that to work properly. Also, why not, when it is supposedly overheating, turn on the heat and see if it drops down more, see if it reacts to that. That could also indicate that there isn't sufficient flow or isn't sufficient cooling within the system, because that acts like another radiator inside your dash when you do that. In fact, when your vehicle is overheating, a good idea is to turn the heat on. I know it sucks, especially because most times it overheats in the summertime and you're driving the windows down and everything trying to breathe, but you could save your engine by doing that. Because it will, or it should, bring the engine temperature down a bit. So there's a little bit more testing that you can go through here that hopefully can lead you to whatever this problem is, if there is indeed a problem. Like I say, if it's not a question of your gauge not reading correctly. And moving on. All right, we still got time. Chris Rocha, hey Eric, I've got a Hyundai. Wait, exclamation point, I got a Hyundai. It's an '01 Tiburon, which means shark, I think. I think that's what they were advertising. Seems to be a pretty good little car. Only issue I noticed is I seem to be getting a smell of gas off and on. Last week I noticed when I looked like a very small fuel leak under the car, though I couldn't figure out where. Totally popped open the fuel pump access panel under the rear seat and discovered what looked like an old fuel leak on top of the tank where the fuel pump goes. I tightened down the bolts and refilled the gas tank, and I no longer see any evidence of a leak. However, the smell seems to be there, and the computer sometimes give me a P0455 eval leak, gross or no flow. Also, my short-term fuel trim varies between -3 and -9, while the long-term sits around 3. Lastly, I'm not sure, but I suspect I may have an exhaust leak somewhere under the car. Any suggestions on the smell and fuel trims? Well, the fuel trims, the short terms, indicates that it's removing fuel, so it's perhaps detecting a rich condition. Based on your description, it almost sounds like they might have been going after maybe an evap problem at some point, and maybe pulled a fuel pump out for some reason. And if they did, and they didn't quite get the gasket that seals on the top of that gas tank on there correctly, that could be where your fuel smell is coming from. I know you say you tightened some things down. It sounds like somebody was back there. And if you've got a problem like this and there's evidence that somebody was in there, that's a pretty good indication that somebody might have messed something up. So you might check that seal there. Also, you say gas smell, but it could also be exhaust, because you talk about a possible exhaust leak. So it could be exhaust that you're smelling, not necessarily the gas. That's a tough call. But I would definitely take a closer look where you suspected somebody was in there dealing with a fuel leak or possibly an evap leak, and those numbers could indicate that maybe there's some valve that might be stuck open that's causing the charcoal canister to vent when it's not supposed to. Hard to say. You might want to. Evap leaks are tough, because without some way to check for those leaks, traditionally a smoke machine is used. And the prices of those have come down. In fact, I've even seen videos on the internet of people making homemade smoke machines to do things like this, to check for these leaks. Because the smoke is a real good way to find out if, like, say, one of those solenoid valves is leaking. You can disconnect the hose from it and activate it and find out if it's leaking, when it's supposed to be closed. And there you go. You found your leak. But I would be looking where you've seen evidence that people have been in there doing stuff. That's where I would start my search. And then if not, start looking around the evap system, like I say, with smoke in some way, shape, or form. Like there's a video out there, or a couple of videos out there, about making a homemade smoke machine that might be of benefit to you, because just to try to buy one of those is pretty expensive on its own. Well, that's another not repair related question. There's another question that's not exactly auto repair related. I'm trying to stick to auto repair related questions. Here we go. Anthony Bongard. I have replaced the head gasket on a 1998 VW Passat and did an extremely overhaul. Brand new timing belt, timing chain, timing belt tensioner, etc. It should be good for a long time. I've started and it runs. I have started it and it runs. I'm sort of stuck. I haven't added the coolant yet. I'm debating on flushing several times first, or should I just add the G12 factory VW coolant, run it for 500 miles and change all the fluid and check everything out. I'm sort of scared because this is the first time I've ever done a project this big. It has rained here a lot when the hood is down, water buildup in the battery compartment, brake booster area. Battery's not in there. What do you think is that issue? As far as the water leak, I'm not really sure. That's something different. As far as coolant, I wouldn't run the engine without coolant in it. And I don't think you have to worry so much. I'm suspecting what you're asking here is, after doing that amount of work, especially removing a head gasket, the debris that inevitably gets down inside the engine when doing a job like this. I think that's the direction you're going in, and I've dealt with this. And honestly, it's not as big a deal as you might think. I mean, if there's a lot of debris, well, maybe, but if there's just a little, it's usually not a concern. I've done several head gaskets where I clean things up, and there's small little bits that get down inside the coolant, And usually, you know, down the road, regular coolant changes usually solves the issue. That may be good enough. Outside of that, as far as the water leak, you know, maybe there's a seal that wasn't sealed correctly, or the way it was parked, or you got me on that one. But I think I know who to ask. Check out my friend Humble Mechanic. He's a VW tech, and he may be able to tell you exactly what's going on here. He works on those things every day. So look up Charles Sandville. He's my friend, Humble Mechanic. See if he can help you out with that issue, or be more specific with that, because you know, he's probably dealt with it in the past and could probably give you a little more insight there. All right. Brown Cordero. Oh, there we go. Cordero. Any idea how to repair the dim cluster issue on a 2007 and up Tahoe? No, I do not. I'm not familiar with that issue, but I actually have my neighbor over at the shop has a similar vehicle, and he was having a problem with his oil pressure not reading correctly, and we tracked that down and believe that to be an issue inside the cluster itself. So if that holds to reason, they may have had issues with those clusters, and it may involve replacement of that cluster to deal with that. I don't know if there's a repair for it per se. I really haven't looked into it all that much, and I don't have any direct experience with that. So it would be difficult for me to say if that was indeed the cause, the issue, the problem, that type of thing. All right, Josh Leviton. Radiator fan on my 09 F-150 is making a whining, grinding noise. Only started doing this when I got my truck lifted with a 6-inch rough country kit last week. What could be causing this this all of a sudden? Good question. So you lifted it, and now you have a noise with the fan, whining, grinding noise. I'm wondering if when you were under there replacing suspension components, if perhaps maybe you might have dislocated the fan shroud in some way, or moved the fan shroud and the fan is coming into contact with the fan shroud. It's easy enough to check. With the engine off, just go out there and look to see if there's any witness marks on the inside of the shroud, or move the fan around and see if there's something going on there. The other thing I'm thinking of is with the lift kit, if it's putting stress in different areas on the chassis, if that stress is causing something to twist or move so that the fan is making contact somewhere. You might, let's see, 09 F-150. I'm wondering if that's a fan off the front of the engine, or it has electric fans on the front. Either way, I'm wondering if you can loosen the mounts and then see if doing that allows it to like settle into place. But I'm thinking that somewhere along the line, something got stressed and something has gone out of alignment, and that's the source of your noise, especially if it happened after you did the lift. So I would go over your work with, you know, the lift and see if there's anything that you did in the area of those fans that might have come into contact or might have stressed the area and caused it to twist or get in a bind and make the noise that you're talking about. Let's see, Doug Eastman. Thanks for the comments on the 05 Escape, Eric. Tires are, I got a response already. Tires are new Michelin's. PMs are solid on this car. Maintain myself, except for this PCV, which, based on my research, really requires the intake manifold replacement. Sucky. I was skeptical the PCV would cause this kind of MPG drop either. I'll think on this one and let you know if I come up with anything at the next hangout. Okay, well, keep us posted, Doug. And that pretty much takes me to the end of the questions that were posted. I'll jump down and see if one of these other questions real quick, one of these other non-automotive questions. Here we go. Stephen Thompson, will Eric the Car Guy ever get a motorized bicycle? It might make you feel like a kid again, LOL. Well, if you're talking about a motorized bicycle, yeah. I used to have a motorcycle many years ago, and I don't anymore. For a couple of reasons. One, I was on a backcountry road one day, just cruising along, and I hit some gravel while I was making a turn, and I just kept going straight and went off into the ditch. And this was a backcountry road, so there was nobody around, nobody really coming by, and I was okay. The bike was okay. I managed to get it out of the ditch. It took some doing, but I sort of realized, like, if I had really been injured, that could have been it. Like, seriously could have been it. And that, all the people that I know that ride say, you know, there's people that have gone down on their bikes and people that are going to go down on their bikes. And I was one of those people that went down and said, you know what, this may not be for me. And I ended up selling it, and I used the money to go to art school. And I haven't looked back since. But yeah, I did enjoy it. It was fun. I did feel kind of kid-like. But I don't know if I'm going back there. I've really gotten into my four-wheel friends. But anyway, that brings us to the conclusion of our program, which was an hour long, and I did it. I managed to do it. Yay! And once again, special thanks to Advanced Auto for giving us this hour-long show. I'm going to put links in the description to pertinent information for them. You can order parts online, pick them up in the store, that kind of thing, store locator, that kind of stuff. Also, they have a wealth of information that you can use to help repair your vehicles. In addition, I have those things too over at EricTheCarGuy.com. Once again, I will not be answering any questions posted to the live event after the event concludes. I also can't see the comments being posted to the YouTube video, so apologies for not answering those. But once again, EricTheCarGuy.com. Also, you can check out the offerings from advance as well. The next show, 2 weeks. I'll post in the description the exact date. My calendar's at the end, and I can't see what the next date is, so sorry about that. But I want to thank you for joining me for this live show where I answered your questions, and I hope I was helpful. I certainly had fun. And if you wish to connect with me socially, Google+, Facebook, Twitter, and also Instagram. Close each of my videos, including these live ones, with be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks again.